Hello, everybody. Scott Golden here with the Pro Wrestling Logic YouTube channel, and we are continuing our World Class Championship Wrestling review series for the 1982 year. This particular episode is the March 20th, 1982 episode, and it's notable for a few reasons. And for those of you who are new, we are running through the entire WCCW library that is available on the WWE Network. There are some gaps in the early 82 stuff, but it looks like once we get through May or June, things are more complete, so that's cool. In any event, let's get into the action, as it were. We open up with an interesting match, Bugsy McGraw versus Jose Lothario. McGraw, as mentioned before, a bit of a slower character, a little zany. Looks like in post-match interview, he is pulling a heel turn here, or at least the beginnings of one. But after the match he has with Jose Lothario, one doesn't need to wonder very much why, as this match is a brawl of reasonable note. The match is kind of, I hate to say ECW-esque, but for 1982, there was a lot of brawling in the crowd. Very much punch kick. The crowds are significantly different, as one would expect here, in that there are no barricades, there are no barriers. It's very much a risky proposition to be brawling into the crowd here, but surprisingly, you see a lot of fighting, inclusion of weaponry, inclusion of just different things here, and Lothario, who is known as I guess I would say, preconditioned luchador, is a major force here in the Texas area, and obviously later goes to challenge himself by being the man to train Shawn Michaels. There is a later promo in the broadcast, which I found kind of interesting. We'll talk about it more when I get there, but Jose Lothario mentions being the brass knuckles, champion, and challenges McGraw to fight for that. I don't know where that's going, so maybe we do see that reinstated. It's interesting because the brass knuckles championship, when I was doing commentary in the late 90s, we had a guy who was a major Texas fan who actually, and this will sound funny, this is real indie-rific, but purchased himself a championship belt and labeled himself a brass knuckles champion and did the Falls Count Anywhere type matches around the circuit. So certainly that concept had quite an effect on at least a certain group of fans, probably those who were teenagers in the early 80s and watching World Class as it started to syndicate across the country, which they did around the mid-80s with actually 83, 84 with the Freebirds and Von Erich's feud. But anyway, this match, if you like the brawling style, worth taking a peek at. Not a lot of technical wrestling here, but you don't really need it. McGraw does pick up the victory using a foreign object. One could assume the camera doesn't catch it, but one could assume it to be brass knuckles and getting a cheap win there. And then we go into the next match on the card, the Texas heavyweight champion Wild Bill Irwin, otherwise known as Chauncey Irwin. He is in a non-title affair with Richard Blood, who has been mainly an enhancement talent for the first few months of 1982. Has a decent showing for himself here, hitting quite a few good drop kicks. Irwin, who I had only seen primarily in later iterations like the GWF and other smaller Texas promotions in the early 90s, really is a lot better. I don't know that better is the right term, but more well-rounded than than I had originally given him credit for. And he does, successfully defeat his opponent. I say well-rounded because he's taking really just risky maneuvers for a guy in 1982, not limited to a beautiful diving headbutt from the top rope, going about 3/4 of the way across the ring and nailing the headbutt splash style maneuver, and almost Harley Race style. But the ring at the Sportatorium, which I'm assuming is 16 by 16. When I look at it, depending on the camera angle, I'm even wondering if it might be 14 by 14. But while certainly not the feat of like a Van Terminator for the early 80s, seeing a guy execute that type of maneuver is there. If you're into certainly the modern style, which if you're into the modern style, you're not on this journey with us, I wouldn't think. But if you're into the modern style, Irwin, not exactly a guy who's going to tear it up as far as bouncing all over the ring. Very deliberate with his actions. And, but he does pull out, whether it's a butterfly suplex, the superplex, or the diving headbutt, he'll pull out at least 2 to 3 impressive maneuvers for the time period every match that he's in. Then we go to a rather angry Bugsy McGraw, who actually does have either what looks to be a festering gig mark, or maybe busted himself open during that week of the loop, because he does have a mark on his forehead. In the promo he cuts, he basically turns against everything sane. He starts to cut a promo akin to a early 90s or mid 90s after the heel turn Bob Backlund promo, where he turned on everything. He starts ranting and raving about not wanting to be a nice guy anymore. He doesn't care if he's fighting his wife or Godzilla. Hopefully they're not one and the same. He's just tired. He's sick and tired. He doesn't care about the fans. He doesn't care about anything but his career. He cares about himself. He cares about me. He cares about getting noticed. And he rants for a good 3 to 4 minutes here. Definitely worth the promo to go out of your way to see for the benefit of non-scripted promos. I mean, you knew by the end of that promo this guy was nuts. Actually reminded me a little bit of Buzz Sawyer in the delivery department. So if you like Buzz Sawyer, you might like this particular promo iteration from Bugsy McGraw. Then we move along to a King Kong Bundy match with Jesse Leone. Not a fan of this match in that Bundy is a monster. The announcers once again trying to bring up the idea of him taking on Andre the Giant. That seems to be a main feud they're building towards. Maybe a stadium show of some sort, or wrestling Star Wars type thing. But Leone gets some unnecessary offense. And when I say unnecessary, first of all, I mean this is a and actually before this match begins, Jose Lothario comes out and cuts a promo mid-ring in Spanish and in English first, Spanish closing, where he challenges Bugsy McGraw for that brass knuckles championship we talked about. Jose looks a little out of shape. If round is a shape, then he's in shape, but he certainly looks a bit out of shape at this point in his career. Anyway, about a year away, maybe a little less, from starting to train Shawn Michaels at this point, so I don't know if Jose starts to fade out of active duty here in the next year or so, but anyhow, it's just notable there. But we go into the Bundy and Leone match, and before that, Bundy basically goes after Jose Lothario, telling him to speak English. This is America, speak English. He's not across the border. That would not hold up well today, obviously, but different time, different place. Bundy does take a couple of drop kicks and actually does, I think, almost leave his feet once for Leon, which if you're building the guy as an indestructible monster, I really didn't like that. We do see him win after both an avalanche in the corner at mid match point, and then the big, what the announcer calls a crush splash, which amounts to just a big splash. That is the derivation of how Bundy wins this particular matchup. And then we move to the, I guess, semi-main event. I don't quite understand why they do this in World Class. I think it has to do with, wanting to expose the Von Erich boys as much as possible. We see Arman Hussein against Kerry Von Erich, who is the America's champion at this point. And actually, yes, he is the America's champion. Well, I don't think he was actually announced as such here in this match. Although looking at him, he does have the belt on. Hussein, by this point, is a manager slash wrestler, which I find interesting because it really does appear that number one, managers and wrestlers here are, I don't know that I'd say interlaced, but you can be both. And also, I guess the whole Texas roster at this point might be around 20 people. They don't do a lot of they don't do a lot of just necessary bringing in enhancement talent. Everybody on the card can be different sides for different people if needed. Von Erich obviously does a good bit of action here. Hussein, who is a manager but also a notable wrestler, takes quite a bit of the offense throughout, using every dirty tactic he can. Obviously, his alignment with the Great Kabuki comes in fact here, and then we see the interference by Kabuki. The Kabuki and Von Erich feud, specifically in this iteration, Kerry, although he's still involved with Kevin quite a bit, is factored in here. Kerry needs some help, and Al Madril comes in street clothes, which I prefer when guys do run-ins if they're in their street clothes. Also, you don't see music being hit before a run-in, which, gosh, when someday, if my health holds out and I'm running an independent organization, I don't care if nobody likes me. If you're doing a run-in, you're not getting music. The sound guy isn't in your back pocket. Anyway, so we see Kerry and Al Madril go at it with Kabuki and Hussein for quite a bit. Gary Hart gets involved. Now, Gary, I believe, was in the plane crash in 75, 76. I think he was in the Ric Flair plane crash. I got to look that up, but I know he was in one. Hart does not take a whole heck of a lot of bumps. He does bump here, although what I find interesting is he takes his own bump and just kind of rolls onto his side. He very rarely leaves his feet throughout the 80s. I know in WCW, in the 89 Muda and Funk stuff, I don't think he left his feet very much there either. But good to see Gary getting involved. I honestly think Gary is one of the more underrated managers overall, because every time he spoke, he commanded respect, and people would sit up and listen. Then we go to arena highlights of Kerry Von Erich and the Great Kabuki. Obviously, this is a clipped affair, and we see Fritz Von Erich on the outside for Kerry, Gary Hart on the outside for his man Kabuki, and as is to be expected in this clip of about, let's say, 6.5 minutes or so, just a lot of chaos, brawling. Kabuki gets the kicks, and nothing really gets accomplished here. They brawl around. Fritz Von Erich is there for his son, and actually does get a few shots in on Gary Hart. There's debate over the ending of the match, and it's clear that Kerry takes a few shots and gets misted, and one of the other Von Erichs runs in to make the save. So again, they're stretching this feud over several months, which is rare today, but par for the course here in 1982. So that is your review for this particular episode. We do go into April with the next episode. My goal is to have 4 or 5 of these, if not more, depending on my schedule, up per day over the next little while. But obviously, health permitting and time permitting. But I really do want to commit to this project, getting it done by the end of the year. And I'd even like to get it done in a couple of months so we can move on to another territory. The ultimate goal to have the largest audio library of pre-2000 reviews available, because I think that would be a really cool thing to do. Anyway, so we will move into the April 3rd is the next option we have for a show. We get the 3rd, the 17th, and the 24th of April before we move into May. So those 3 episodes next on the docket. Please feel free to like, subscribe, comment below. And until next time, keep your feet on the ground, your mind in the moment. Until next time, everybody.